Willie D Live.
What's up, family? The mysterious death of Nolan Wells continued to generate questions about what happened on Horn Island on July 4th, 2026. Joining us today to help us better understand the behavior of those closest to the case is Elliot Connie. Yeah, Elliot is a psychotherapist. Yeah, man, we about to get down to the nitty gritty. What's up, Elliot?
What's happening, Willie? How you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good, but otherwise, man, uh, it's going down around here, man. It's a lot of people out here involved in this Nolan Wells case moving funny, man. They moving
Yes.
funny. Now, listen, family. Uh, Elliot is not here to determine guilt. That's already been determined. Uh, he's here. He's here to better help us understand the actions of the people involved, the actions and the communication of those involved. Right. So, Elliot, you saw the Warren Hudson interview, and I
Yes.
saw your comments. I heard your comments about that interview and what you thought of Warren and his answers and his behavior, his expressions, his disposition. Can you share your thoughts with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, somebody sent me the video, and to be honest, man, I did not intend to be following this story as closely as I've ended up following the story.
Mhm.
But my heart goes out to this family. My heart goes out to this kid. And somebody sent me the video that was done of the Warren kid doing the interview. And as a practicing psychotherapist, I've been a practicing psychotherapist for almost 20 years. I've worked with literally thousands of people that are struggling with grief and loss issues. And while it's true, every human being processes loss and every human being does grief differently, it is also true that there are some pretty commonality things that you look for that let you know that someone is appropriately handling a loss and dealing with a loss and experiencing a loss. And some of the things that stood out to me were just, I mean, quite frankly, alarming. Now, to be honest with you, I have no earthly idea what the truth is. I'm just as lost as everybody else. But there are certain things I would confidently say based upon my clinical experience. Number one, that interview was rehearsed and scripted. And you could tell because he was repeating phrases. Like, think about an athlete, for example, when they get interviewed for a press conference and they have PR people who work for the whatever team they play for. They will tell them, make sure you get these points out, regardless what the interviewer is asking, make sure you get these points out. It was clear to me that he had been coached to say how close he was to Nolan because he repeatedly referred to Nolan as my brother.
And best friend.
And best friend. It was like the theme he was trying to get out. Nolan and I are very, very close. It was also very clear to me that he had been coached to explain the damage to the boat because he had like extraordinary level of detail about that boat. And if you think back to when you were 18, when I had a car, my first car when I was 18, that car broke down, and like if someone said what happened to the car, I don't know, the thing broke. But he was like the bilge was doing this and doing this and doing this, like, so that stood out to me. The other thing that stood out to me was the absolute absence of emotion, which again, everybody does grief differently, but to lose someone that you have repeatedly referred to as your best friend and brother, to lose someone like that just 2 weeks ago, the funeral that you did not attend was just 2 days prior. And you are talking about this with absolutely no emotion. That is absolutely weird. Now, when I talk about emotion, people need to really understand what I mean. And I'm talking about any emotion. He should, even if he's completely innocent, he should have the emotion of, I I hate that I'm sitting in these accusations and couldn't go to the funeral. My best friend and brother was buried yesterday, and I didn't want to make it uncomfortable for the family, so I didn't go to the funeral, and I'm broken up about it. He did not say that. He did not say, I'm missing him. And if you think about the level of loss, it's not just losing my best friend and brother. He was very clear. We went to elementary school, middle school, high school together, and even in our first year of college, we continue to talk. So it's not just losing a friend, it's losing someone that's a part of your daily life. So he should have said things like, man, I wake up and I look to my phone expecting a text from him and I haven't gotten that text. Like, that's how you experience loss. He didn't say any of that, which of course is very, very unusual. And maybe the biggest tell, the most concerning thing, I shouldn't call it tell, because I honestly, I don't know what this person is guilty of, but I would bet a lot of money that he's hiding something. He knows something that he's been coached not to say. Maybe there was an accidental death and they don't want him talking about it. Maybe, who knows what, but something he's hiding. And I would bet my clinical professionhood on the fact that he's hiding something. And the most alarming thing was, the interview was released in segments. And one of the segments, the interviewer, whose name I don't want to say because I don't support the person, but
right.
The interviewer brought this person to the actual coast, to the actual island, which at minimum is the last place he saw his best friend. At minimum. At maximum, the place where he witnessed some sort of action or even participated in some sort of action that led to his death. And you went to that exact same spot and you were not triggered in any way, shape, or form. That is psychologically incredibly unusual. To go back to the scene where the last place you saw your best friend, that is absolutely unusual. And I cannot tell you, that just speaking as a clinician, I cannot tell you how many times you do therapy with someone and the parents of a lost child say things like, I can't go into my child's room. They'll say something like, it's been 2 years, I haven't even touched the room. A sibling will say, I haven't gone into my sibling's room. No one has touched the car. They say these things because I know people that, like, they've lost somebody in a car accident and they no longer will drive on the road because they don't want to drive past the place where their loved one was deceased. And 2 weeks after losing this person, you are standing at the spot which at minimum is the last place you saw your best friend. That is psychologically very, very odd. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up because I'm probably talking too much. But the last thing
you valid. You know, you're on point.
The last thing I'll say is, if you watch that interview, and I watched everything everything I get my hands on. Maybe there's stuff I missed, but I watch everything I get my hands on. The last thing I'll say is, every word Warren said laid all of the blame on Nolan. He, like, for example, he said Nolan was drinking. He didn't say we were drinking. He said Nolan wanted to stay on the island. He didn't say we shouldn't have let him stay on the island alone. So, like, there was no expression of remorse. Like, man, if I can go back in time, I would have said, maybe we don't need to drink today, guys. Or if I can go back in time, I would have fought even harder for Nolan to come home with us. Or I would have said, look, we're a group of 4. How about 2 of us go with the boat and one of us stay with Nolan? Like, but there was no expression of responsibility on his part whatsoever. That's incredibly odd, because even if it's 100% not your fault, a lot of people will say things like, I wish I could have done more. I wish I had answered that phone call when they called me. I wish I didn't have a headache that night and I had gone out with him. Maybe I could have changed the outcome. He didn't talk about any absolutes of changing the outcome even once. And that's very, very odd. That's very strange. You lost your best friend and you have no ability to be like, if I can go back in time, maybe if we'd arrived 10 minutes earlier, 10 minutes later, maybe if my mom had told me the boat was damaged, we never would have been taking it. Man, I wish I could have stopped him from hanging out with that girl. He doesn't say any of that. Now, again, does that mean he's guilty of murder? No, I don't know what happened there, and I can't say that I do know. But there are some red flags that tell me he is hiding something, and he was coached in the interview to do it. And they found an interviewer that would not push. They did not find a valid journalist. They did not find, Nancy Grace or Geraldo Rivera. They didn't find a journalist that would actually do journalistic work or do journalistic questioning. They found an internet personality that would help him spin the narrative the way he needed to spin it. And that choice in and of itself, it's just psychologically odd.
Yeah, they found somebody who actually had a narrative already, and so
Yes.
he walked them into the narrative that he had already created for himself. So
Correct.
all they did, he was basically Buddy's support, what he calls support blanket. That's
right.
basically what it was. Yeah, it was a very, very softball interview. What do you think about? How do you interpret the communication style of Warren?
I mean, that's hard to say because I don't know him personally, but I can say the communication style of Warren in that moment just struck me as odd. Like, so here's an example, right? So clinically, we get trained to read more than just words. It was very unusual that his tone never really changed. It was very unusual that the pace at which he spoke never really changed. If you go back and watch the video, he's distant. He's sitting back distant from the interviewer. Now, we know non-verbally that you will sometimes distance yourself from topics you don't feel comfortable talking about. So something about that conversation was making him uncomfortable. So the point that where you physically try to remove yourself from the conversation as if it is a tangible thing. Those are things that we notice as a clinicians that just tell you this is an unusual communication pattern. His voice never fluctuated. And so I'm going to get super nerdy and technical here. When you get in a high stress environment, your body releases a chemical called cortisol. And that will like, it's like that fight or flight thing. And all of you you've had that moment where it's like adrenaline is flowing through your body and cortisol is flowing through your body. And that will make your heart race. That will make your palms sweat. It will change how you're communicating in real time. It'll change the pace at which you talk. It'll change the tone, your volume of voice. None of that changed over an elongated period of time. Like you can talk at a similar point for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but we're talking a 30-minute clip, and he's just that's
you're really good, man, because I already before I could even ask you the question, you've answered about 3 of my questions, man. Because I did want to ask you about stress. I wanted to ask you if you thought that grief, fear, or stress could change the way a person tells a story.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah.
For
So,
sure.
but you didn't sense that changed anything about Warren's story, because you felt like in your mind, Warren's whole story was rehearsed. It didn't matter what questions was asked. He already had the script.
I feel like Warren's whole story was rehearsed. I feel like they picked an interviewer that will help him get out the rehearsed story. And I knew as I was watching that this is not the whole story. Something in here is incomplete or inaccurate. I don't know what it is, but something in here is incomplete and or inaccurate.
What do you think about the friends choosing to remain silent and lawyer up?
I have mixed feelings about it. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. If I had an 18-year-old child who I was convinced was completely innocent, and I felt like the whole world thinks my child is guilty, I would probably also hire an attorney, and I would probably also want to protect my child. I love my child. I want to make sure my child does not end up in the justice system and end up being held accountable for a crime that I, as the parent, don't believe they committed. But there's a moral part of this and the moral part of this is none of those kids are behaving like someone that loves Nolan and his family. None of those kids have gone by the house, hugged the mom and dad. Like, none of those kids have been according to the parents, they haven't been in contact with those kids in any way, shape, or form. And so that should eat you up. Like, so when you do, all right, I'm gonna be super nerdy again. You gotta apologize. I gotta apologize.
Hey man, that's what I got you for, man. That's why you're on here. You know, the nerdy stuff is the good stuff.
All right, I got a hip hop part of my brain. I got a nerdy part of my brain. So a lot of people don't know how lie detectors work. Now, the way lie detectors work is they don't actually detect whether you're telling the truth or not. What they detect are stress markers that happen in your body when you behave or say something incongruent. Because incongruencies should hurt you. So, for example, if I say I love you, it should be difficult for me to watch you be sick. Right? So if you have a loved one and they got the flu, you should be like, gosh, it's so hard for me to watch you sick. Because the fact that I can't do anything, your body experiences as an incongruence, and you struggle with that. And your stress markers go up. And then, like, a lie detector test would notice that. So when you see that thing going off at a lie detector, is not detecting whether the person is lying and telling the truth. It's detecting the presence of stress markers. So they should be struggling to sleep. They should be not eating or eating a lot. They should be, like, one of the things that stood out to me, I don't know what this means, but it stood out to me, is Warren was incredibly well groomed. Like, these things, like, if I lost my best friend, I'm not going to the barbershop. I'm not even thinking about it because my heart and mind would be totally focused on that. And that didn't seem to be the case here. So I, as a clinician, I look for the presence of stress and then help the person deal with stress. And he didn't seem to be showing a lot of presence of stress.
How might the silence affect Nolan's family, psychologically?
Betrayal. If I genuinely believe that Nolan was with friends, and on some level they must have believed it, which is why they were all comfortable with him hanging out with these kids, I would feel abandoned, I would feel betrayed, and I would feel very much, especially given that Warren's mother is a judge, I would feel like the system is working against me when all I want is the truth.
What about the limited communication with law enforcement to the family? How does that affect the family?
Well,
how might it affect the family?
That's actually not super duper uncommon. So a lot of families complain about when they're the victims of a crime. They always talk about how I haven't talked to the sheriff, I haven't talked to the detective, I haven't talked to the DA. That's actually not very uncommon because oftentimes the sheriff, the DA, the prosecuting attorneys, they will have strategic reasons as to why they're not giving certain information to the family. So the family usually feels like there's some sort of secret going on that is making it hard. But just because the law enforcement isn't talking to the family, that does not mean anything nefarious is happening, because that's actually not a super uncommon thing.
Yeah, but the thing is that, it makes people question the law enforcement's motives when they go dark. It's one thing for you not to tell me everything you know, but it's another thing when you go dark or you tell me, don't call my phone again. I've heard grieving families say that investigators have told them, don't call me again.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the biggest part is like when you're calling them and you're calling and you're calling and they're not calling back, or they kick the can down to the next guy for you to talk to that person, and then that person takes a week or 2 weeks to call you back. You calling and calling, and steadily kicking the can down the road, I think that can affect somebody big time.
It 100% is going to affect it big time, because if I were the parents, I would be wondering, are you talking to the judge? Like, if you're not talking to me, are you talking to these other families? But it could be the case that they're just going silent to build a case. I don't know. But if I were those families, I would be living in absolute fear right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I say when I'm not listening, when they're not calling me, if I'm on the family side, if I'm calling and I'm calling, they're not calling me back. I mean, just a courtesy call, show some respect, man. You got to grieve the family. Just out of respect, pick up the damn phone and say, I got your message. Or send a text message, say, I got you. You know, we work on it. You know, like, look for a call from me next week. I got it, man. Ain't nobody in your family dead. I got it. Your family member didn't die. I got it. But have some damn empathy, bro, for the people on the other side, and put yourself in their shoes. But it just appears to me that law enforcement oftentimes, especially in cases like this, they go dark, man, because they don't want to solve the crime.
Well, to your point, here's the thought that scares me the most. If Nolan goes missing and there's no social media, there's no Tyler Perry, there's no Al Sharpton, and there's no Colin Kaepernick, all who donated money, and that money was being able to be used to pay for the funeral, to pay for independent autopsy, and to pay for an attorney. Like, we would never hear about this. And this family would only be dependent upon the law enforcement that is not really talking to them and doesn't seem to be treating this as if it's an urgent situation. So think about, to me, that's the scariest part of this whole story. It just so happens that social media has created a groundswell of attention, making it so that law enforcement couldn't ignore it if they were desirous of doing so. And then you have people like Colin Kaepernick saying, I will pay for an independent funeral, which included a flight to Washington, D.C., and then the medical examiner's cost and all that. And then you have Al Sharpton donating money so they can afford an attorney like Ben Crump. And then you have, I don't remember who else, Tyler Perry stepped up and offered a reward. I think the reward money is now up to $125,000 for anyone that provides information that leads to the truth of what happened with Nolan. But if none of that happens, this family is literally living in silence. So to me, that's the scarier question. I actually have, this is going to be a weird way to word this, but I have increased confidence in law enforcement because of the social pressure that currently exists. It'll be harder for them to ignore given the spotlight that is currently on them and doing their job. Not impossible, but it's harder for them to ignore given how big of a spotlight this is.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I agree with that. A family, you know that there are other cases out there that's just like this. I mean, eerily similar cases. Yes. It's crazy how many of these cases have been popping up over the last years. So many people looking for answers. Their loved ones have come up mysteriously dead, especially ones who have been hanging out with their so-called friends or may have had some type of negative encounter with law enforcement and they come up missing. And it's not just Black people, not Black people overwhelmingly, yeah, but it's not just Black people that this is happening to. So this is a crisis right now. There's a crisis, and I think one of the biggest problems is that justice is not being served. If justice was being served, that could be a major deterrent. But justice is not being served, and I think that is because it's not just because of incompetence, lack of resources. It is lack of interest, and it's also, I believe, that many times members of law enforcement are also culpable in these type of situations. But that's just my thoughts. You know,
could be,
absolutely. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank Elliot Connie for joining us. And how can people follow you if they want to check you out on social media?
Man, go to Instagram or Facebook and Either search my name, Elliot Connie, 2 L's and 2 T's, or at Elliot Speaks. That's how you can find me. And I will be posting about this story because I think we all have a responsibility to keep this young man's name in the public, because that provides the pressure for the wheels of justice to continue to turn. And I will continue to do that until the truth comes out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elliot Connie.
Thank you all.
No
Thank you
more
for having
talk.
me, Willie.
Absolutely.